But welcome everybody. I just want to start by thanking John for coming to the conclusion that he did. I think it was a decision that he arrived at, with a lot of deep thought. Obviously, it wasn't easy. I don't think, it never is for someone at that level and with that kind of competitive drive and competitive fire. But I think at the end of the day, he recognized that it was in his best interests and in the best interests of the Denver Broncos, and he arrived at that conclusion. He said yesterday he feels good about it and excited, and in my chats with him since yesterday, or yesterday and afterwards when he met with you, I think that's truly the case. We're energized to go out and find a GM that'll help us get better. John Elway, as I said in my statement, is the most impactful and important person in the history of the organization. I don't think there's any arguing that. He's one of the most impactful and important people to the National Football League and the city of Denver, all of the above. And my first year in this league was John's rookie year, 1983. I was a couple years older than he was, and I didn't know anything. I watched the game grow, and I learned from it. And part of that growth came up through the 80s and 90s. If you look at the history of the league in terms of its popularity, its television exposure, and all that. And then through the 2000s, when in 2010 our organization was in a really bad place. We had lost, I think, the faith and the trust of the fans. And John Elway pulled us out of that. And I'll always remember that. I've always said, I said this to John, we were a couple of years too late maybe on that hire in 2010. But it worked out very, very well. He's the first to recognize the last 4 years have been not where we need to be. And he made a decision that he feels will help us get going in a better direction. And as I've said, I commend him for that. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, Untitled Chapter, go ahead, please.
Hey, Joe. First off, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. I have a couple for you. First off, do you have any concerns about attracting the best candidate given the uncertain ownership situation and the fact that the new GM will quite literally be working in the shadow of John Elway, who you just called, the most important and impactful person in the franchise's history?
So it's a two-part question, right?
That's a two-part question, and I got to follow.
Okay, so the first part, do I have any concerns given the ownership? Is that I'm sorry.
Yeah, any concerns about attracting the best candidate given?
I don't, because I think this is an attractive job. And I believe this is a good place to work. I believe people want to work here. There are only 32 GM jobs. I feel good about our organization, the people that work here, how we conduct ourselves. I recognize we haven't won. I recognize that there are questions about ownership. But if you're a candidate that wants to succeed and wants to be great and do great things, you're going to take a job, and this is going to be a place where you can succeed because we will give you the resources. And I assume that's not going to be any different regardless of who the next owner is. Because I don't know why you get in this business whether it's a member of the Bowen family, it's Brittany, or it's another owner, whoever it is. Why would you not give your football department and give your organization every possible resource to succeed? I don't know any other way. Now, look, we haven't been successful lately. I get it. My head's not in the sand. But we certainly have the resources. That's not an excuse. And we'll make that clear to every candidate. As for being under the shadow of John, I don't worry about that. John Elway, I've had a lot of discussions with John Elway over these 10 years about where our organization stands and how we are, how we're performing. And John's got a really good grasp of where we stand from a 50,000-foot level, and that will continue. And I know that he won't meddle, he won't get in the way. He's made it very clear to you. He'll make it very clear to every candidate. The responsibility of the 53-man roster and picking the players and being the general manager and all of the decisions that come with that will be that that person that we choose. I will say that, you know, they will report up through John. I want that to happen. I think that makes some sense because John's football acumen is while we have, you know, I know people question some of the performance of a team, and that reflects on John. I believe he knows what it takes to win. I believe he knows what needs to happen to make our team better at a big level, but he's going to let the decisions lie in the hands of the new general manager, Vic, and others. So I'm not at all worried that he casts a big shadow over this next person.
Yeah. All right, Joe. And then the second question I had for you was, John kind of hinted yesterday, you know, he's entering the final year of his contract, so this is for 2021. But he said, you know, it's something he figures he'd like to stay on board with. From your perspective, is this kind of a wait and see how it goes, and then maybe talk about an extension in that same role later on in the year, if it comes to that, or what's kind of your...
Yeah, I'm looking at this very short term right now, and I haven't thought much past that. I know John will always be a part of the Denver Broncos, aren't he? He has spent his whole life here since the day he left Stanford. And this community, I shouldn't speak for him, but I know this community means a lot to him. I know the Broncos mean a lot to him. And he will always be a Denver Bronco, and he will always want to be a part of it in some form or fashion. I don't know what that is today. I don't think John really knows what it is today. We'll talk through that. But for now, our eyes are laser focused on bringing in the right general manager and, you know, turn a corner and go in a new direction in some respects that'll help us get better.
Thanks.
Next one, Ryan O'Hara.
Hey, Joe, got a couple for you. First up, will Brittany be involved in the GM search at all?
She'll be involved in a periphery way. I've asked her to do some background and research work on that. We're going to, you know, cast a look at a lot of candidates. I think it makes sense to interview multiple candidates. She won't be involved in the interview process directly on the screen, but she's going to do some background work, and myself and Patrick and some others that will keep her informed and have conversations, because I want her to understand how the process and how it works. But we're going to limit the number of people, and I talked to her about this, that'll participate in the interview process, the direct interview process at this time.
And a couple for about ownership, specifically putting the team up for sale before the summer's trial. Have you or the trustees considered a court order and permission from the judge to start that process, particularly because Beth Bolin has said that the sale of the team would lead to a resolution of that trial?
Well, I think the way to answer that is the trial has to take place, or the claims have to go away before the team would be sold. We haven't made that decision, Ryan, but we're basically just focused on getting through this trial and validating the trust, which validates us, 3 trustees, to make a decision whether to keep it in the family and name a child or sell the team. And, you know, we're not putting the cart before the horse here. We're gonna, you know, this case is in front of Judge Scipione, and we have to determine, and we're ready to go to court. I wish we could have done it earlier. It would have been better for a lot of people, but we're ready to go to court in July and get it resolved, and we're confident we'll prevail and that the trust will stand up, and we'll be able to make a decision soon thereafter.
Yeah, and then one follow-up, Joe. The league mandate established in November about the controlling owner having the vote. Does that put you under a time crunch, or as Goodell said, you guys can wait on that until after the trial?
Did Goodell say that? I didn't hear him.
No.
that.
Has he told you that?
Oh, okay. He hasn't really talked about it. You know, I have under his authority and the authority blessed by the finance committee, the ability to do this through 2022, March of 22, I think. And so we are in litigation. I think other owners that I've spoken to, as well as Roger, recognize that that's, you know, slowing things down a little bit in terms of a decision-making process. But I know the league will want us to reach resolution as soon as we can. But the trial's going to have to happen first. And it's going to have to verify and validate our Pat's trust and our ability to execute it.
Thanks.
Next one, Jeff Legwell.
Hey, Jeff, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm it. I got it.
There you go, man.
I'm a little slow on the draw. But, Joe, I'm curious as to the search for the GM. You know, it's been a while since you you had to do this? Do you have a framework of candidates you like, cap, personnel, a mix, or what is your goal for what kind of individual you want on the job?
Yeah, the skill set, you're sort of asking what kind of skill set are you looking for is the way I interpret your question. And it's a lot of things today, Jeff. You know, it's not just evaluating players. It's managing a staff. It's setting a structure and a plan in place organizationally that the coach adheres to. I think one thing that's very important is player evaluation and doing that in concert with the coach, so that the coach and the general manager have an understanding about what kind of players the coach needs, the team needs to be successful, from the first player on the roster to the 53rd player on the roster. All of those decisions are important, and I know John is looking for that, and I will be as well during this process. That's a critical component. You know, to be able to work with Vic and understand what Vic needs and how the players that Vic needs to be successful is a better way of putting it, I think. And that more than anything is critical.
Next one, Mike Bliss.
Yeah, Joe, in searching for the GM, how important is a minority candidate for the Broncos?
Very important. Very important. I think your organization gets better with diversity. And diversity is a lot of things. It's people of different race. It's people with different opinions. It's people that add value in different ways. You know, we're going to interview several black candidates. The roster, the Denver Broncos player roster, is 75% black. And, you know, we're better. We're getting better at diversity as an organization, but we're nowhere near where we need to be. And this is a chance to interview and learn and who knows, maybe arrive at a candidate with great diversity. And so I think it's important. And even whoever is chosen, it has to go beyond that as well. I think that's a key point. And a lot of us here, Nancy Svoboda, our chief HR person, Brittany, has been a driving force in getting an initiative ready to on diversity. And I you know, it's just critical to our organization because the thing about it, it makes us better in so many different ways. And, you know, we've got to recognize that and we've got to improve in that area for sure.
Next one, Eric DeLala.
Hey, Joe, a couple for you. The first is if you have any update on if events are going to return to the stadium this spring and summer, and if there's any early hopes about a more normal capacity for games next season.
The answer is I really don't know. I wish I did, you know, and our whole stadium staff wishes they knew. I think some events are set or slotted, but there's no confirmation today. We still don't know where COVID will be. We still don't know where the vaccinations will be. And so for me to predict or forecast, I think would be irresponsible. You know, the word everybody uses is hopeful. I'm hopeful for all of us that instead of me sitting in this empty auditorium, you guys will be here someday. And we can chat in person and not on this screen. But for now, we just don't know when that day is. And I can't predict. I'm optimistic that we'll be back to, you know, maybe a full capacity of fans in August. But for me to tell you that that's going to happen, I just don't know that. And that's part of the complexity of where we are and the anxiety that's created because of that. You know, nobody really knows what the future holds. But you do have to be optimistic. You do have a vaccine. You do have people taking it. Rich Slivka, our fellow trustee over the age of 70, he got in line and he's up. He got his vaccine on Monday. And yeah, I don't know if anybody else on the screen is in line. I don't think you're old enough yet. But having said that, you know, it's not something you really know until it's sort of almost day by day, week by week. Then it turns into month by month. I do think things will improve. I think we'll have fans back in the stands. I do know this. fans are itching to get back to the stands. And they may have a short window on our lack of success over the past 3 years, and they may let us know that when they get back in the stands, and I understand that. But they want to come watch us play. They do. And I'm in that category. I want to see fans in the stands. I want to go to games, you know. I can't go to the Pepsi Center this winter. None of us can. I think everyone's itching to see live events. So I'm hopeful that we can get there. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but.
And then just to follow up on Brittany's role, just curious how she handled her responsibilities with the COVID plan, and maybe how that's impacted how you view her future here.
Yeah, well, let me just say this. I think March 11th, I don't know if I have the date right, the NBA player came down with COVID, and the sports world grind basically to an immediate halt in so many ways. And Brittany was working on several initiatives at the time, and I remember calling her up and I said, "You're in charge of the COVID task force." And she said, "What the hell does that mean?" And I said, "Well, you're gonna orchestrate this for the organization, policies, procedures, protocols, work in concert with the league, because we got to play this season. And, right now we got all kinds of games canceled. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 6 months, but we got to begin to prepare so that we can get in every single game and play a full season and see where we go." And she took it on. We had 13, I don't know if I got the number right. I think I do. 13 of our top executives, from myself, John Elway, on down. She managed the process weekly. She worked with the league. She worked with the state very effectively. I think it was all consuming for her. So some of the other things she was working on, she still was able to do, but the rest of us were sort of all COVID all the time. And she was able to keep the trains on the track. And I know we had a couple of hiccups during the season. None of that was her fault. But at the same time, we did play every game, and we got through the season. I think it's a remarkable accomplishment for the league, and it was a remarkable accomplishment for us. I commend the players, the staff, the coaches, everybody for being able to do so. But Brittany was at the forefront of that. She's done some other things and started some projects on some stadium improvements, fan enhancement, an international initiative. I'm going to give her an office down here at UC Health here. She began to sort of get a flavor of football a little bit, get a flavor of our big picture finances. Still needs experience. Experience is critical for her. And we're trying to get as much of it as we can for her. And we haven't made a decision, but she certainly is the family member that would be on track if there can be an agreement amongst family members and others. Brittany, obviously, as I've said, no different from last year, would be the person to be chosen if it would be a family member. And again, we haven't made that decision today.
Thanks, Marquez.
Hey, Joe. I have two questions. Instead of a two-parter, I ask one and then I'll ask a follow-up. In your salute to John Elway, you said, hey, and 10 years ago, you feel like this team had lost the faith and trust of fans. And John, got that faith and trust back and got a Super Bowl victory. Compare 2020 to 2010. Do you feel like you've lost the faith and trust of fans, or how do you compare the two situations now and then?
I wouldn't compare them apples to apples. I think this is just more real frustration and anger with losing. But I think we have made some strides to bring in some good young players. We've got to get better. We got to get deeper on the roster. We've got to coach better. I've talked to Vic. Everybody knows that. We've got to improve things. But, Vic and his staff are coming back. It's a good coaching staff. I believe that. John believes that. There's some stability for the players, knowing who their coach is going into next season. Again, I don't know that we'll be able to have an off season, Mark, but if we can have an off season where we get them in the building, despite what some people around the country and say about how things may have changed and you can do things differently, it'd be very important for us to have that as an organization with the same coaches for the players. I think that'll give us a chance to be more successful. So I don't think it's quite the same comparison. I don't think internally Internally, things just weren't very good in 2010, as my memory recalls. I don't compare it quite the same to where we are now. We got to get better as a team, and there's a lot of frustration, and it boils over to anger. And I've witnessed it in the locker room after some losses this year, and it carries over to when the players leave and the staff and the coaches leave the building, and it carries over into the community. And I listen and I watch and I read and I know what's going on, and all of that is justified. And we have to do something to stop that. And there's one thing you can do to stop that, and that is win. And we got to win. And we can't go on this way, continue like this, and have this frustration and lose all these games and expect our fans not to just sort of just say enough is enough in some fashion, So we do have pressure on us in this particular occasion. It's similar to 2010.
And because you won significantly after Pat Bowlen had to step away, I don't think there was trust and faith issues with fans regarding ownership, but now I get the sense that there is concern among fans about ownership. I know you're facing a trial. 1 year from today, how confident are you that Brittany Bowlen can be the owner of this team? Or maybe the more fair question is, when is this going to be resolved? By a year from now, will we know who the owner of the Denver Broncos is? Or by March 2022? I mean, yeah. When's it going to happen?
Well, I can't predict the outcome of litigation other than to say I think we will prevail, but I can't predict what will happen after that, okay? There are two family members one of whom issued a press release indicating they would like to see the team sold. At least that's the way I interpreted it.
Right.
There was another press release that followed that from the attorney for Mrs. Bowlen that said they didn't agree with that. And they represent, I believe, the other 5 siblings, Annabelle's and Pat's children. So that's complicated, and that has to be worked out, and there has to be a conclusion to that, and an understanding if Brittany's gonna run the team. There's just no other way around that. And will that happen before March of 22 or immediately after the trial? I'd like to think that it will happen in that time period. And that's for selfish reasons, and it's for reasons that are in the best interest of the organization, the team, the fans. I think all of those people and the family, they deserve an answer soon after the trial.
Thanks.
Without putting an end date on it, Mark, because
okay.
I can't predict what.
Yeah, and my question is obviously probably a question you have as well. Yeah. When the heck is this going to be over?
Next one, Brandon Christoph.
Joe, I've got 2 for you, and like kids, I'll ask them in order. You mentioned Brittany won't be a part of those interviews. Who will be in on the GM interviews? And I guess beyond John, who all will really be participating versus just observing?
Vic, John, and myself will be the active participants, and since we're all over the age of 60, we need an active note taker. So that'll probably be Patrick Smythe to help us out. But that will be it.
And then secondly, Matt Russell, when he had his issue in 2013, his legal problems, you were hard on him. How proud are you that he was able to really turn his life around? And then had he not decided to retire, would he have been a candidate to fill the GM role?
Yeah, I think John and I talked about him being able to present himself as a candidate. I'll answer that part first. I think the more important part of your question is what happened to Matt several years back. It was an issue with substance abuse. I think he'd be the first person to tell you he hit rock bottom. It was not a story that reflected well on him or the organization. I had direct conversations with Matt about it. To his credit, a couple of things I would say. Number one is, that was grounds for some serious discipline maybe up to dismissal at the time. But when I talked with Matt and I talked it over with a few others in the league and others, I think it's better to be in the business of building lives back up than tearing them apart. He was a really good person. And, I don't think anybody on this screen really knows how he was able to just build his life back up and make great contributions to our organization. But more importantly, make contributions to himself and his family and take care of himself and turn his life around. And he's a neighbor of mine. He's right down the street from where I live. And he's got a terrific wife and 2 terrific young kids. And I sent him a text the other night and I said, you will forever hold your head high for how you took the challenge on of being at rock bottom and rose up to resurrect yourself, basically, and become a great father and a great husband and have these 2 terrific kids and a wonderful wife, as I've said. And, Matt's got his greatest years in front of him. I know he says he's retired, but I'll work on that. He's going to make great contributions, first and foremost as a father and as a person and a husband and everything else. And I know I'm going long on it, but I just have a lot of admiration for what he went through, all that he did after that to recover first for himself and then contribute to the Broncos.
Next one, Andrew Mason.
Joe, 2 questions for you. First of all, what were some moments over the past few months where it really hit you in the gut just how much you guys lost because COVID-19 resulted in having to adjust so much about what we know of a football season?
I don't know. I think that's a tough question because 32 teams had COVID-19. But we're a pretty young team, hadn't been together a lot of new faces. Coaching staff had some turnover with some new faces. Coordinator, offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. So I think it was just, there was so much emotion involved with it and everything was so different and it was difficult. And I think it was just a bigger challenge for our organization based on the way we were structured and how we are currently as an organization in terms of players, coaches, and staff. It was difficult. But, they fought through it. We played the games. We had some very, very frustrating defeats. We had a lot of injuries. I think there were times, I'm sure, when players and coaches were deflated and some coaches got sick and, a lot of players very concerned about their own well-being, the well-being of their families, their futures. So Andrew, I don't have any specific moments. I just think in a lot of ways, given the makeup of our team, COVID was extremely challenging. I'm proud of the way we responded and got through the season as we did. But I do think it had an effect on our players, our coaches, our entire organization for sure.
Okay. And second, obviously there was the financial hit from losing fans in the stands all year. How did the organization adjust and account for that in 2020? And what's the outlook moving forward?
Well, we had a significant downturn in revenues, but we were prepared for it. And I commend the work of our chief financial officer, Justin Webster, who every month I meet with and go over the financials. And we actually were in a pretty good position to be able to handle this. I won't say the same thing to you if I'm on a screen next year. If we go through this the way we went through it this year, that will be a big challenge for us. Although I do think we can get through it. I do. We are well positioned, but what's most important to our organization is that we have all of the resources available to put in front, to give to the football side of the building so that they can be successful. That didn't change this year. I don't expect it to change next year. And I'm a glass half full guy on, even though I said to Mark earlier, I don't know, or I said to somebody earlier, I don't know what to expect in terms of fan levels in the stadium and that kind of thing. I do think we'll have some people back. We may not be all the way back from a revenue standpoint, but I believe firmly we can make it through 2021 unless there's just some unforeseen COVID situation that even sets us back even further than we were set back last year.
Guys, we've got time for a few more as we're trying to get to everyone. Next one, Troy Ray.
Joe, thanks for joining us today. Looks like you're feeling well. You feel like you're back to normal after the bout with COVID?
Yeah. Thank you, Troy. Thank you for asking. I feel good. I've been doing some rehab stuff, and it's really helped the energy level. That was the hardest thing, just bringing that back. But feel good. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, good to see that, man. I'll play devil's advocate here because you get it a lot from fans. Fangio's record is almost similar to Vance Joseph after 2 years. Vic's had some clock management issues, at least from a media perspective. We've seen that. What is it you've seen from Vic that makes you believe he can kind of get better in year 3? And should he feel more or less secure with a GM coming in that ostensibly didn't hire him? John hired him.
Yeah. Well, I think Vic's going to be part of the process. Let me answer the second part of your question first. He's going to be part of the process. I think it's important that he have input and sign off on whoever's brought in as a GM to be able to help him. So I'm not too worried about that. I think Vic's got whoever we bring in will have good football acumen and some experience and some knowledge about, and we'll be sure to be able to work with Vic on shaping the roster the way the team needs it for Vic. So I'm not worried about that part of it. In terms of, the lack of success and some of the things you pointed out on the field, Vic knows he's got to improve. I do believe, Troy, that he has great ability to teach players how to win and put them in a position to, through game planning and everything else, where they can be successful. We just haven't executed it, and we've had some problems late in games, and it boils up in frustration and anger, and I understand that. So does Vic. And we got to improve there. We have to win. We've got to get better. But I do think he's a good football coach. I think the staff is good. I think they're experienced. I think one more year, I mentioned this in an earlier answer, another year with them together stabilizes things to a certain point. Fans will disagree and say, it's just not going to work, whatever. But I don't see it that way. I think it's got a chance to work.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, hey, Joe. Thanks for doing this. I know you probably view every offseason as vital and important, but with everything going on, and you've touched on a lot of them, from ownership to hiring a new GM to Fangio, like you just talked about, Locke, Vaughn's contract. Is this, I guess, one of the most pivotal off seasons that you've faced in your tenure in terms of what it means for the future of the franchise?
I don't know. I sort of feel like they're all pivotal in many ways because what happens during the season is kind of put to bed, and regardless of whether you've been successful or not successful, it's okay. Now what is kind of the reaction that I look at now. The pent up frustration that I've talked about, that exists, and maybe that puts more pressure on us, but that's the way it goes. So we just have to respond to that, and we have to do better, have to win, as I said so many times earlier, while we've been meeting here. But, I think it's critical that I'm really hopeful that we can get the players in here for some form of an off season, and I just think that's really important. So that part of it is critical. We can do meetings, like we're doing this press conference on the Zoom and things like that with players. But just the interaction, whether it's in the weight room or it's doing conditioning outside or it's doing the OTAs and being together at that time, I think that's for the makeup of this team, I think that's critical. And so there were some reports that that were out there, I believe last week, that some of that can be done away with. Ryan, I think you even wrote on it a little bit. I don't see that as beneficial to the Denver Broncos in any way, shape, or form at all. I think we need to be together as a team.
Thanks, Kyle.
Joe, do you expect the schedule to be expanded to 17 games next season? And what are your thoughts if that does happen?
I think there's a very good chance that will happen. And the big decision on that, I think, comes down to how many preseason games you're going to play. We need all three. You know, the games are important. Fans might not like to hear that, but you know, there'll be alternate slates if you go to 17-3, where you're playing 9 games at home one year and 10 games at home the next. I think that was those games being absent for us this past year had an effect on how we played, for sure.
Thank you. Guys, we got time for 3 more. We're going to go Zach, Eric, and Jeff. Go ahead, Zach.
Hey, Joe, thanks for talking to us today. Can you take us through how John came to this decision to step back from the GM role? Was it something you brought up to him, or was it something that he came to you with the idea of?
I think we were just having a mutual discussion, as we do from time to time during the season, about some things and reflecting. And I think I might have asked him how he perceives where he wants to be here in the organization, and combining that with what's needed to fix things to get better and start winning again. And he started thinking about things and reflecting on it. It was about, as I said, 3 weeks ago. But I can't remember, Zach, one specific conversation, who initiated what, how it came about. But the conversations were very candid and very honest and very open. They were quite civil. There was no discord or anger or disagreements. If there were disagreements, maybe actually, and from time to time, but you know, we worked through those a little bit, and John arrived at the conclusion that this needed to happen. So, as I said, I think it's commendable and in the best interest of him and the organization, for sure.
Next one, Eric Goodman. Eric, yeah, you got to unmute your arm.
Can't see you, Eric.
Sorry about that, Joe. Following up on what Zach just asked you, what if John had come to the conclusion that he did not want to give up his GM role? Would you have been okay with that?
Well, I don't get into what ifs, but we arrived at the right conclusion. So that's where we're at. And John, we talked that through. And, you know, I didn't contemplate one way or the other. If that had been the case, then I'm not sure where we would have gone. But as I said, I think the decision that he reached was the right one. And he made it. We talked things through. It wasn't difficult to get to where we got to. As I said, it was very civil and very honest and thorough in terms of our dialogue throughout these last several weeks.
Last one, Jeff.
Joe, I just wanted to get the structure of the interview process here. You're going to do a first round of interviews and then perhaps a second round with finalists or whatever, and have you asked permission for anyone else other than Champ Kelly?
At this point, I don't want, people are under contract, and if we ask permission, we got to get it. And I don't want to, I don't think it's appropriate based on the rules, the anti-tampering and everything, that I mention candidates at this point, other than Champ Kelly's is out, and we did ask permission and receive permission. That is true. In terms of the process, Jeff, Zoom interviews to start. And then I think we'll get down to a list of candidates. And my sense is Vic and John will want to do those in person, which we are permitted to do, my understanding, socially distanced, however appropriate. But I think it's important to get together, as I said earlier.
There will be some kind of COVID restrictions on how you do in-person interviews, in mask, in a certain date.
I think so. I got to go back and read, but I believe so. There was a 4-page memo that we got on how to conduct interviews in a COVID environment, and I'm the first to tell you that I lost attention after a couple of paragraphs. So I better go back and read the entire thing and make sure that we do that. And I'll get some help on making sure that we follow those protocols in case I misunderstand anything.
Thanks.
Thanks for taking the time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Hey, listen, before we cut off here, guys, I just, I want to thank you for getting through this year, and you know, these circumstances for you were just as complicated and just as difficult and cumbersome, and pick whatever word you want there. And you hung in there with us, and you were able to do your jobs to the best of your ability, and always fair and honest with your commentary and everything else. And I just want to thank you for hanging in there with us and getting through the season. And like I said, next time we do this, I look out over this empty auditorium. I'm hopeful you guys will be here and we can chat in person. So thanks for everything.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, John.